Welcome to another episode of Deep Thinkers Society. Today, we're thrilled to introduce our esteemed guest, Eva Slywester. An accomplished astrologer and author, Eva has dedicated her life to the exploration of the cosmos and its profound influence on our lives. Her latest work is Impossible Dreams, Hopes, Fears, and Expectations for Saturn and Pisces. It's a compelling anthology of essays that serves as a literary guide to the new cosmic vibe that began on March 7th, 2023. In this episode, we talk with Eva about Saturn, the karmic father of the zodiac, now in the sign of Pisces, which happens to be elusive, creative, and more feminine. We discuss how the uniqueness has started playing out and the effects of the cosmos that go back as far as COVID pandemic in March of 2020. You do not have to be an astrologer aficionado to enjoy the deep astrological conversations we have in this episode. So let's dig right in. Hey there, deep thinkers. This is Lori Marie, and we have Maddie, my co-host here, and we have Eva Slywester. Am I saying that
Sylvester.
correctly? Say that again.
Sylvester.
Sylvester, got it. So Eva is an author and an astrologer, and we have her on today to talk about one of our slow moving planets that kind of take hold on us throughout life called Saturn. I too am an astrologer and know that the slow moving planets are pretty prominent in our journey through life. And you, Eva, have written some astrological essays and a book on Saturn. And I was wondering if you would tell us a little bit about the karmic father of the zodiac and share with us maybe a bit about your perspective on Saturn and how you came about writing your essays.
Sure. Thank you. Let's see. Well, my book is Impossible Dreams, Hopes, Fears, and Expectations for Saturn and Pisces. So I live in Eugene, Oregon, and I wrote this with some friends of mine in the astrology community here in Oregon. So
very nice. And what brought you to Saturn?
Well, to Saturn and Pisces, how I got on that specifically was as Saturn, to back up a little bit, Saturn goes through all the same 12 zodiac signs the sun does every year. So, I mean, just in case some viewers may not know this, but you probably know your sun sign. So if your birthday is, August 1st, you know that you are a Leo because the sun is always in Leo at that time of year. And the sun goes around every year predictably in that cycle. Well, what people need to think about is a clock with many hands, moving at different paces. And so the outer planets like Saturn, their hands that go through the same 12 signs, but they just go at much slower paces. So Saturn goes through the same 12 signs on a 29.4 year cycle to get all the way around. It spends about 2.5 years in each sign. Okay. So the sign before Saturn in Pisces is Saturn in Aquarius. And so one big thing that happened for me when Saturn was in Aquarius was that I rediscovered this old novel that I had written in my 20s. I had, put it aside at my Saturn return, just was done with all of that. But it got rediscovered under, sort of strange circumstances. And I wrote some new astrological material for the front of this old novel, thinking, okay, maybe it didn't quite work as a novel, but I'm going to reboot it as an astrology book. And I started writing some new astrological material for the front of it. And I realized, this one section of the preface for my novel really makes more sense as an essay for an essay anthology on Saturn and Pisces. And so that's where the book came from. And then I, put out the word to my friends that I was going to make a essay anthology about Saturn and Pisces, and we got some contributions and we just ran with it.
So Saturn in Pisces is fairly new. Just for the sake of listeners today, Saturn changed signs. Last month was it?
Well, March of 2023. So we're a little over 1 year into Saturn in Pisces. So
yeah, and then so what people might notice with Saturn. So let's talk a little bit about Saturn real quick. For those who don't know a lot about astrology, Saturn is stereotypically the father, like the strict father, maybe the karmic overlord of the zodiac. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Saturn in general, and then we could move on to maybe what that means as it goes through its new sign of Pisces?
Well, Saturn has to do with discipline and focus and structure, and those are the good sides of Saturn. Saturn is not all gloom and doom. If you know how to work constructively with Saturn, Saturn can be a very good thing. However, the downside of Saturn is that it can bring punishment or consequences if you've done something that's not working in line with reality. Saturn is basically the reality principle. And when you're having a personal Saturn transit to your own chart, you often find out, well, this investment I made, or the way that I handled this relationship, or this career path that I've chosen is just not working out in reality.
Not logical.
Yeah. So if you've made like a bad choice, you'll often find it out at a Saturn transit, and it's not somebody sitting up on a cloud pointing an angry finger down at you. It's just kind of calmly saying, well, here's the way the world works, and what you're doing is not in line with that right now. That's all it is.
And so Saturn is literally not happy in the sign of Pisces, because Pisces is far from realistic. Pisces is fairly elusive. Is that correct?
Real bad.
Well, yeah, I think it is sort of a odd combination. I don't know if it's a bad combination, but it's definitely an odd combination.
And
Pisces rules like the arts and spirituality, and compassion for the less fortunate. That's another big Pisces thing. And but Saturn can bring focus. Like, I'm so glad we had some technical difficulties on our way into this meeting, because we had a chance to play with virtual backgrounds, and I found a really cool virtual background. And Saturn in Pisces is like the arts, and so Saturn, the planet of discipline and achievement, comes into Pisces, the sign of art, and says, oh, we are going to learn how to do this art really well. And so think back, one Saturn cycle ago was the 1990s, and the video games in the 1990s, when I was, nerdy little kid in elementary school and loved to play video games. The video games went through a big jump in quality in the 90s, about the time of the Saturn and Pisces transit.
Yep.
And then one Saturn cycle before that was the 1960s. And, in the 1960s was a time of, great renaissance, really, in arts and music. Lots of wonderful, colorful visual art, and lots of wonderful, wonderfully talented musicians. So, just these backgrounds that we're sitting here with, elementary school Eva would have loved that in the 90s. I wouldn't have been able to imagine something like that.
Oh yeah, I agree. I would have had a field day for sure. So you wrote your book, and then you also wrote some prominent essays. And so I would consider you an aficionado on Saturn. What do you think is a big message, a big takeaway from Saturn and what we're going through as a society, in this here and now moment with Saturn going through Pisces. Like, what kinds of things can we expect to see? What kinds of things could we affect to, maybe feel or notice? And, what would you say we should expect?
Let's see. Well, one thing is that Pisces can be very trusting, sometimes, naively trusting. Pisces really wants to see the best in people, but Saturn and Pisces, there could be some disillusionment with authority figures. Just, Saturn is the planet of authority. And, we could realize some authority figure that we've trusted is not so good. That, we really wanted this person to be right, because they really told us that they were a good person and we wanted to believe them, but that's not the way that it worked out in reality. So there could be people who have experiences of that sort.
So, like, as a society, that would be our revolt with the government and the way that we're starting to find out a lot of things, not only the government, but the entertainment industry. So here we are, the entertainment industry, which was always like an escape into fantasy with, a lot of creativity and, a lot of elusiveness because it wasn't real. And, we put some of these stars on a pedestal, and now we're noticing that a lot of them weren't really what we thought they were. Does that kind of fit what's happening right now?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point, that it doesn't just have to be, the most obvious, sort of authority figures. I mean, Pisces is, the arts. So yeah, crack down on any, artist who's up to things that they shouldn't be, for sure could happen.
That's the karmic father for you, right?
Yeah.
Restrict and restructure. So, because since COVID in general, nothing's really been the same. It's sort of been like a lead up, and I feel like right now it's kind of at a culmination, and so we might see a lot more happening over the next year or so until it changes sides again. I was mentioning to you prior to recording today that I pulled my chart and Matt's chart. Matt didn't have anything too significant going on. He has Pluto making a square to Saturn, but I actually have and this will be the end of the month, Matthew. Pluto will be squaring your Saturn. But for myself, I have Saturn squared Saturn. So that's one of those pivotal transits that, you have, maybe only twice in a lifetime. Am I right?
See, well, one of my co-authors in this, in Impossible Dreams, Gail Johnson, does a essay on Saturn transits to natal Saturn. She covers the Saturn returns, Saturn squares, and Saturn oppositions. And you actually have a lot more than 2 Saturn squares in your lifetime. Most people do, because you get Saturn squares in both directions. Like there's a Saturn square 7 years before a Saturn return, and then a Saturn square 7 years after. And so I think you and I must be about 14 years apart in age, because I just had a Saturn square Saturn last year. But for me, it was the one, right after a Saturn return, and you might be heading into your second Saturn return. Am I right?
I don't think so.
No.
So like most people, okay, you have your first Saturn return.
Yes, my second one.
In your late 20s, and then your second one is in your late 50s, and then anybody who lives long enough gets one in their 80s. So
I still have a little bit of time.
Yeah.
I still have a little bit of time, but yeah, I will have my next Saturn return. And when you have your first Saturn return, I'm under the understanding that people go through lots of trial and tributes during that time, because Saturn, took you through your first cycle of life lessons. And when you get to that first return, it's forcing you to be mature. And then when you get to that second Saturn return, you've done life, over through two sets of patterns. And, I believe that we evolve as a spiral. So I can imagine myself looking down on life with all that extra experience. And then we come to a stage where we sort of role model our life experiences. What do you think transpires maybe with that second Saturn return?
Well, I mean, I suppose it depends a lot on what sign and house your natal Saturn is in. So I think a lot of common things that happen to people around that time in life is that they may start to think about retirement. So some people start to think about retirement depending on what kind of work that they've been doing, especially if it's been like a really physically demanding job. Second Saturn return might be a time when they think about what's next. But, a lot of people, if you had children early, like closer to your first Saturn return or even before that, you might be looking at a empty nest at your second Saturn return, and that can be a big now what for some people. So
exactly.
So those are maybe a couple of the more common second Saturn return themes for late 50s. But there can definitely be different nuances depending on what sign or house your natal Saturn is placed in.
Yeah, for myself, it's my 8th house of transformation and other people's money. So I could totally imagine that once I have that next Saturn return, that life as I know it will totally transform and restructure and look a little bit different than, and as you stated, maybe potentially be in retirement. Who knows, if I I'm able to be in it at that time. So you said you just went through your Saturn square Saturn transit. And what types of challenges were you faced when you had that in your chart?
Well, I think so I just went through the Saturn square that happens after the first Saturn return, and so that was I think the worst of it was when I was 36. I'm 37 now, but I think what happened at my Saturn square last year was that it kind of called back to the waning Saturn square, the Saturn square in my early 20s leading up to my Saturn return. So what I had was Saturn in Virgo back in about 2007 or so, 2008, when I was in my early 20s, and then a Saturn return, and then the age 36 Saturn square from Pisces. And so the waning Saturn square that I had in my early 20s, that's when I discovered astrology. So I had just graduated from college, class of 2007, into the Great Recession. And so I had been sort of a spoiled brat because I was good at school and high achieving, and got a lot of good girl pats on the head from the grown-ups. And then I graduate into this recession where people aren't kissing my behind anymore. In fact, it's the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, reality hit.
So that was a big Saturnian letdown, but I happened to be reading this big book of art history, Sexual Personae by Camille Paglia. In the middle of this big thick book, she just drops in, oh, by the way, I believe in astrology. And I saw that and I thought, what is that? I mean, that's the one thing that like my whole family would agree on, that they're not into astrology. Like I had grown up with, some of my family was, very conservative Christian, and some of my family was very secular, science, materialist, atheist. And the one thing they actually agreed on was that they were not into astrology. And so who is this person who is, challenging that? And so of course I went, right there, and I started reading my transit reports on astro.com, and I thought, wow, there's something to this. They're getting something here. I just, followed those reports for a few months, and then I would say several months later, I started, getting astrology for dummies type of books from the public library and just learning from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love AstroDNist. Astro.com, AstroDNist. I started researching astrology in 1990, well, maybe 1997, but like in the library, I found someone actually said, "Hey, go to this site, AstroDNist," and I've been on there forever. It's like 30 years, like forever. Like it's a great site, Astro.com. Yep.
Yeah, it's my favorite too. That's where I started working with charts as well. But I kind of aged both of you out a little bit, because for me, I started astrology with Linda Goodman and her Love Signs book as a 14-year-old. And she writes very poetic and very romantic and very fairy tale-ish. And I fell in love with astrology and her definitions. And, I would go to the grocery store and, the magazine aisle and all the, colorful magazines. Well, then there was those little square ones that were like Mountain House Astrologer, and I'd open it and there's all these technical glyphs, like you see here in my background, and numbers and like degrees. And I'm like, I had no idea what I was looking at. I had no idea, but I loved it. I was fascinated.
I was like, I want those. I want that. With the little horoscope books, like little triangle horoscope books. They only have them like now in stores, but I don't think. But I haven't seen one in a while. But I used to be like, Mom, I want that. And she get it.
I love this. Yeah, I love astrology. So I guess Saturn kind of took over the conversation because that's where you got started. But what do you mind if I ask? What is your sun, your moon, and your rising sign?
Yeah, Leo sun, Scorpio moon, Libra rising.
Oh, so we're similar. I am a Leo sun, Scorpio rising, and Cancer moon. And Matt, what are you?
I am a Taurus sun. My moon is Aquarius, and my rising sign is Aries. My daughter has moon in Scorpio. We did not want that to happen.
Oh.
I have a really good friend who is a double Scorpio, and
her
she
mom.
holds true.
Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. Tell us about your mom.
No. Her mom. Well, Lisa's mom, my daughter's mother's mother, her grandmother, had moon in Scorpio, and we were following it like to the due date. We were like, it cannot happen in this window. Her moon is in Scorpio, like my mother. Moon is in Scorpio. Her mom. She didn't want that.
And it happened. Yeah, it happened. It usually happens when you don't want it to. It's kind of like you on some level know it's going to happen. So interesting, Eva, that you started off in life, with like no real calling to astrology, and then it kind of has taken over and become a big part. You've written books and essays. So I guess my question to you would be, what's your takeaway? I personally use astrology in my readings as a form of self-awareness to help people, look a little deeper, and also to, create conversation so that we can open that door and give them some intuitive insight. But for you came from a background that didn't really embrace maybe this type of metaphysical, spiritual world, but yet you have one foot in it now with astrology. So what does your life look like now that are you still pretty scientific and literal and maybe more conservative, or have you embraced other aspects of life that you didn't expect as well?
Well, I would say, I definitely have both feet in astrology now. I mean, it is pretty much my whole life at this point. But I think it also is important to take the best of, other traditions too. It is important to have, a scientific, critical mindset and really evaluate what you're hearing, because when you get into the alternative spirituality world, not everybody who opens their mouth is speaking the truth. You do need to have your own discernment. You do need to bring your rational mind to the task, and you also need to bring your spiritual side to the task. I mean, and I think the religions of the world have a point that there is a higher power, and I see that higher power as governing the cycles of the planets, which are meaningful, and I've diverged from my background in some ways, but I think that ultimately society needs structure. I mean, I've watched a few episodes of your podcast so I would know what to expect. And I was really interested in the episode of the Aurelia Codes, who was talking about being a starseed, because that's not my experience. I'm a regular person living in Eugene, Oregon, and I'm trying to figure out how can regular people navigate this world. And what I would say about the traditional religions is that, regardless of whatever complaint anybody has about them, regardless of what they've done wrong, one thing they do right is that, when you have a baby, you know what your next steps toward giving that baby some spiritual training are. In many Christian denominations, though not all, you would take the baby to be baptized pretty shortly after their birth. And then, they would go to Sunday school, every week, and church services, as soon as they're big enough. And they would, be educated throughout their life, and they would have a community that they belonged to. But what I would like to see for Saturn's transit in Pisces is I want the alternative spirituality world to grow up a little bit, and to be able to provide that kind of guidance for people in my generation who may be having children in the near future, or maybe already have.
I think that might be a little challenging, with Neptune also in Pisces, and adding that elusiveness. And then you have Pluto about to, with the whole Pluto in Aquarius. I think that, structure with those two zodiac signs, with our slower moving planets, are going to leave us a little, I think structure is not in the near future. I can't see that happening, for a lack of a better word. I think that we need to learn as a society to be comfortable, uncomfortable. I think we're learning the next step in evolution. And that is that, have you ever watched that reality show, Big Brother?
Yeah.
Yeah, and how they always say, expect the unexpected. I really think that that's where we're leading towards. I think that we're leading towards, expecting the unexpected as normal. And I think that COVID set us up for that. I think that once that grand challenge as a planet, happened, putting all of us outside of our comfort zone, it set us up for the fact that we just never know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen, and we have to live from the perspective that anything can happen at any time. And that's learning how to be comfortable, uncomfortable. I mean, we were in the most uncomfortable situations during COVID. I mean, you couldn't travel anywhere. If you were sick, you were in the hospital alone. If you were lucky to even be in the hospital, they didn't really want you to go outside, but that's what everybody felt like they needed to do, was to go outside and be in the sun and be in nature. Like, people were naturally called to nature. And so I guess I feel like that's where we're headed for the next 20 some odd years. We're going to be living a life of expecting the unexpected, and it's going to transform society. So for you to want structure, maybe in spirituality, I kind of feel like that will come after Pluto leaves Aquarius and goes into, and maybe not even when it goes into Pisces, because they're there again. But at that point, it's transforming spirituality. So there's a possibility of restructure. But I don't think Saturn has that power to create what to transform what we're going through as a society right now. And that's just me, that's just my intuition and just feeling out the way it's going and the patterns that I've been seeing. And everybody, so many people complained during COVID, and I knew instinctively that this was like a blessing in disguise. I felt like, and it really sucks that I have to stay home and work from home, and my child has to be home with me. But no, it doesn't, because now I don't have to commute. Now I don't have to pay for daycare. Now that the traffic isn't as bad, now I get to spend more time with my child and not like hours and hours at work. I mean, there were so many blessings in disguise. We can't just go shopping. So let's go kayaking. We got kayaks and now we're kayakers, and the connection to nature is much better than a department store, Turn off our TVs because everything on TV was reruns because, there was no writers. There was no new content. So it forced us outside of, our everyday life, our comfort zones. And I just don't see us ever being able to look back. I don't know, Matt, what's your perspective on all of these changes as a society?
Well, I mean, I think it probably it had to happen. It was going to happen eventually. The world being like, this is the first time 4 years ago when March, COVID hit, and the world got on lockdown, and that's never happened. It's never happened like globally, a lockdown, it entered like something happened where they got control over the whole world. Whoever they are, got control over the whole world for the first time.
And it backfired.
And it backfired.
And it backfired.
I knew it from the get-go. I was making fun of it. I was like making a post on Facebook, like that week, that first 2 weeks, making fun of it. Like, why won't you take the vaccine? It's got good stuff in it. Oh, we don't know what it's good in, but you don't want to kill your grandmother. I was making fun of it from the get-go because I knew it was fucking bullshit.
Yeah, my metaphor for COVID, is like, the powers that be were the parents, the ones in control, the control freaks, the authoritarians, and society were all the teenagers. And when you force them to do what you want them to do as a collective, everybody rebels, and it's literally like, a teenager not wanting to listen. I have to stay in. Yeah, right. Oh, I can't go anywhere. Sure. I felt like, and it backfired, and the teenager won. I mean, but in a way, it's more of like the teenager won in the sense that they got the freedom that they wanted. You know what I mean? Of course, there's consequences that come with it, and we had a lot of consequences during COVID as well. People were like stealing all the toilet paper off the shelf, and then we had to learn a lot of things. But all in all, I feel like that's the metaphor. I feel like we're like, you think that you got control over us and you have the upper hand by forcing us to stay inside, but not all of us are stupid. Not all of us are going to listen to you. Not a lot of us have minds of our own. And yeah.
They can pull it off again. I don't think they can pull it off again.
I feel like they're still trying to grab hold and still trying to. And, and I just think that we're all evolving, and there's nothing that any elite or any society can do to, change that evolution. Changes inevitable.
Yeah. And so, how does that tie into the your? Hold on a second. The Uranus and the
Jupiter?
Jupiter-Uranus conjunction and Saturn. If you could touch on that, Eva. The Jupiter-Uranus is conjunct right now, and Saturn help play with it.
Let's see.
Like Jupiter and Uranus are conjunct, right? Right now.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, in Taurus. Yeah.
Saturn play with that. That's what I was wondering. That's my biggest question right now.
Well, let's see. I mean, Saturn in Pisces is actually sort of broadly sextile, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. I mean, not exactly, but sort of broadly, and so they're kind of cooperating with each other. So, if somebody needs to learn a Saturnian lesson at this point, perhaps the Jupiter-Uranus outpouring is part of that. And so, I guess to go back to what you were saying about COVID, Lori, I mean, a lot of people, associate COVID with this big Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto conjunction in Capricorn that happened throughout the year 2020. And so when they hear COVID, they think Capricorn. But what I remember also is that, the pandemic declaration happened during Pisces season. I remember March of 2020 as the month when everything went crazy. And so we also had the Sun and Neptune in Pisces at this time. And there was a lot of Pisces stuff going on with COVID, and just the way that our emotions were played upon, that a lot of the rhetoric around COVID was very emotional. And sometimes there are reasons why, people need to use emotional rhetoric. Sometimes that there are situations that, are legitimately worth being upset about. But I guess what I would say with regard to Saturn coming through Pisces and, starting to talk to all of that is, well, okay, what are the fruits of whatever you did? You may have done whatever you did, out of a heart full of, compassion and, all the best motives that anybody could have had. What were the results? Did you get results that justified whatever you did? Well, and so that's what I think we may see coming out of Saturn in Pisces, that if somebody, used a lot of big emotional displays, to get somebody to do something, and then Saturn comes through Pisces and says, okay, how did that work out for you? Was it a good result or a bad result?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. A definite spiritual learning experience. I to tag on what you were saying about Saturn, the signs being in Pisces, right when we started our lockdown. Hold on. As soon as you said that, I imagined the fact that so many things were very elusive at that time.
Well, right. It was hard to get, information, and like the information was changing on a constant basis. It was very slippery, right in that first month. I remember it was just chaotic.
Nobody really knew what was going on. Nobody knew what to
crazy.
believe. Nobody. It was very crazy. I'm just glad it's over.
Yeah. Although, I mean, like you were saying that, COVID, had some positive effects for you personally, just being able to reboot my life, reboot your life. Well, I rebooted my life too during COVID. My father died of cancer in December of 2019. And, because I'm a Libra rising, so I had all that Capricorn stuff going on in my fourth house, changes at home. And so he died right before COVID. And so my mother and I were, living together and just having to rebuild our lives. And then this COVID thing just, blew up.
I literally had that exact same November of 2019. My mom died of cancer. And that and again, to piggyback on the positive aspect of it, I was so thankful that it didn't happen during COVID.
Oh
I was
yeah, that would have been bad.
Yeah, I was thankful that, if it was her time, at least it happened before COVID, so she wasn't alone. And that's how, so I understand what you're saying.
That's a really good point. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, to have had cancer and dying during COVID just is depressing, just thinking about it. And there are people that went through it, and there's a lot of people that lost people, and it's really, it is a sad situation for many people. But I still feel like it was such a transformative one for so many people. But I look at the whole experience very spiritual, in the sense that our planet, and again, this might be a little bit out of your, comfort zone as far as, beliefs, but I believe that our planet is ascending. Our planet is evolving as well. Just like people, I believe the planet is alive and the planet is evolving. And I believe just like our human bodies that hold energy in it, and, have parts of our bodies that hurt more than others because we hold our trauma in those locations. I believe the earth is exactly the same way. And the earth is evolving and shifting past its own pains and ascending. And as the earth does that, just like when people go through what's called an awakening, or they go through ascension and they grow and they change, well, then people fall away because they don't match your energy, or they too start to evolve and they go along with you, right? But that's what's happening on the planet. That's what's happening right now. The planet is evolving, and people will either go along with that evolution and evolve and learn and grow too, or they'll fall behind and they'll stay back in the lower frequencies of how the earth used to be. And so I feel like COVID was just like that switch, that on switch. It was like, okay, everybody, here it is. It's happening now, and we all looked at it like a negative thing because, when you look at your shadow, when you look at the dark side of life, it is negative. But I believe that you have to have the negative in order to see the light. You can't see the light if you don't look through the dark at it. So, like Matt said, it had to happen. It was gonna happen, and that is why so many people are. That's why talking about spirituality is so much more of a normal thing. That's why after COVID hit, so many people came to me. Lori, what's this mean? Lori, what's that mean? I'm trying to understand, and people, they want to know, because those are the people that are choosing to ascend with the planet. The ones that are like, stuck in their old patterns and not wanting to change. And, who they are, because they're the same people that they were 10 years ago. And everybody else is like, going to, ceremony retreats for plant medicine, or they're like learning to meditate and taking yoga classes, or they're suddenly interested in astrology or self-awareness, or they're healing their attachment traumas. Like, everybody is going through these things, and the ones that are not, the ones that are stuck, are the ones that are going to be, they're going to feel lonely and dark, and eventually they'll have to shift. Just like Matt was saying, what that happened, this was all eventually they'll have to, because they'll be alone, and in order to survive, we need connection. So that, how do you feel about some of the things I mentioned? Do you agree with any of it, or what's your perspective?
I see that with my best friend, my oldest best friend. Yeah, that is still in my life. Like, I call, 30 years. My best friend, he's fallen away. Like, well, he's not catching on to me, or catching on. Like, he thinks I'm,
crazy.
So,
I'm kidding.
But he's not.
That's what happens. Our friends start to think we're crazy if they're not growing with us.
Like, I know I'm different than I was 10 years ago. Like, he's the same that he was 10 years ago. He thinks the same way he was 10 years ago. I don't think the same way I thought 10 years ago. I've evolved in my conscious.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get it. He doesn't even know he knows my secret, but I haven't shown him, but I don't know. It just, some people aren't ready, not ready
Yeah.
to evolve.
And that's okay. Everything in divine timing. Yeah. It stinks because those that are shifting and evolving are lonely because they're changing
I
and
said
their
that.
tribe isn't necessarily going. But
Yep.
then those who are not going are becoming lonely as well because they're not growing. And so basically what's happening is everybody's being, as we were stating earlier, they're going outside their comfort zones, and they need to learn to be comfortable, uncomfortable, because these are not going to be easy times. You know, it seems like there's always some planet happening, you know, some this happening, some that happening. You know, Lori, what's retrograde now? Oh my God. Well, you know, it may appear to be that way, but it's much bigger than that. Like, these things are happening and you can read them as a map in the stars, but you know, change is inevitable. That's the one thing we can depend on. What do you think, Eva?
Well, I think during the COVID era, there has been, you know, a lot of emphasis, you know, coming from multiple sides of the whole equation. You know, one group saying, oh, you know, my choices are better than yours, and you know, all the good people are over here and all the bad people are over there, and that has gone in multiple directions, and I don't want to be part of that. You know, you know, I would say that, you know, I'm happy with, you know, my own choices. You know, I'm glad that, you know, all of the, you know, craziness of COVID, you know, gave me, you know, time to focus on breaking into freelance writing, that, you know, all of the lockdown stuff, you know, went on, and I just, you know, happened to be able to get the really grinding part of breaking into freelance writing over with then, so that, you know, by the time that society opened up, you know, I was able to have a little more breathing room in my schedule. But you know, I'm glad that there are, you know, people who are interested in reading what I write about astrology at this point. But I guess I'm focused on, you know, what I'm doing, and you know, helping the people who want to read what I'm writing, and I'm not thinking very much about
The bigger picture.
You know, who's doing what, and you know, am I more evolved than anybody else? I don't want to get involved in that kind of thing.
I don't think it's about I think that you touched on a point there. I don't think it's about who's evolved and who isn't evolved. I think it's understanding what's taking place, and self-awareness is the key. You know, and so here you are delving into astrology, and you're writing about astrology, and you're understanding astrology, but you need to at some point make it applicable to what's happening in the world and to other people that you're writing for, is what I mean. So it's not really about getting caught up in what's happening. It's about recognizing it, becoming self-aware about how it's affecting you, you know, and growing and ascending on your own. You know, Matt and I were talking from a bigger perspective, but it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's about understanding what's taking place, and looking at it from a different lens, so to speak, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly, you know, astrologers, you know, we do have to have a foot in world events and know what's going on there. And but it's, I just have not liked the way that the judgment, you know, surrounding COVID-19 and various aspects of that has affected people, especially people, you know, in my own family. You know, we've just, you know, one group of people will judge the other, and then the other group of people will judge them right back. And there's just been so much, you know, judgment and nastiness. And I guess I'm not saying that astrologers should be totally checked out of the world. I'm saying that there is a lot of judgment and nastiness going around, and I don't want to be part of that.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. Because if you think about it, you know, their politics went crazy in the exact same way. You know, people, you know, are black and white or red and blue or this or that, and they're right and the other's wrong, and they all have valid points. But I feel like what Matt and I were talking about, that, you know, media had a big play in manipulating those battles against, and keeping segregation. Because if you create segregation and you can, have, different parties, not liking each other, then the people are not united. And if the people are not united, then you can control them, right?
Divide and conquer.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So really, I agree with you 100%. The goal really is about connection. The goal really is about, finding a commonality amongst all of us, and it structured religion can't do that because not everybody's going to believe in the same thing, but our heart should be the same across the board. We all should come from a place, and for many people, they have many layers above that place, but it's there. And that's what's happening. That's what we're peeling away our layers, and we're learning about ourselves, and we're starting to love ourselves. And once we get to that place, then, the loudness of fighting against others will start to fall away, because we'll be in touch. And that's kind of like what I feel like my mission is. I feel like it's the perfect opportunity to reach out to society and ask them, what do you think is really important here? What's important to you? Is it, that this person is president, or this person, has this gender and they look like this gender, or this person is this nationality, but they live in this country instead? Like, what is your priority? And is that really important? Like, what's really important? And I think that's what needs to come out of this is self-awareness, is learning about ourselves. You just said something a minute ago about how you're focused on yourself and your place in the world and what you could do for others. That's great, because you know what doesn't feel right to you, so you're not giving energy to it. You know what I'm saying? But it's happening out there, and and we're all aware that it's happening out there. And so how are we going to partake? Well, we need to work on ourselves. And astrology is the perfect way to look at aspects of ourselves that we didn't even realize. My sun is in Leo, but my moon is in, Cancer. Like, what does that mean? So my sun likes attention, but my moon's super emotional and hides when they're in trouble. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, I totally, when I'm upset, I hide. I don't want anybody around me. I want no attention at all. You know what I mean? And when I do readings with people and I tell them, about these different planets and how they affect that, then they get these ahas. They're like, oh, so that's why my sun sign doesn't make complete sense, because my moon overpowers my sun sign. And, and that's why, this aspect, my Venus squares Pluto. No wonder I have so much heartache and challenges in my love life, and that makes complete sense because I deal with love that. And people are, and the more they become self-aware, then they become aware of how they interact with other people. And once you become aware of the way you interact with other people, you have the choice to stop interacting that way, or doing what we said and staying the way you've always stayed and not changing, and therefore, not ascending and growing with the rest of the world. So really, astrology is this powerful tool that we can use to understand what the heck is going on in front of us, if that makes any sense.
Well, I think like what helped me when I was, a younger astrologer is not so much, you have a Leo sun that explains this or that, but just, okay, your circle is over here and someone else's circle is over there. You have your chart that's in this circle and their chart is over there. I've got all these, Leo Scorpio squares. And when I was, in college, like right before I got into astrology, Neptune was like T-squaring all of that from Aquarius. And so like, I was just this chaotic mess of a person. My personal relationships at that point when I was in college were just a total train wreck because I was just emotionally out of control. I had no boundaries. If somebody had told me, Eva, you have no boundaries, I wouldn't have even known what that meant. Yeah, but when I got into astrology, shortly after college, okay, your circle is here, their circle is there.
Yeah, and the dynamics of the energy starts to make more sense. Yeah. I know that we're talking about people's personal, natal charts and how it affects, but, you get a lot of self-awareness too when you look at like solar return charts or even lunar return charts or Venus return,
yeah.
because in the moment, it might not be about like who you are as your personality or who you are, internally, but it helps you see what's playing out in front of you and knowing who you are and how it's playing. Oh, so this is happening right now. And yeah, my career is totally at a standstill. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm an Aries, so I like to be busy. And here I am going through a period in life where, I have to be stagnant. And so as a reader, and I point these patterns out, of why it's happening, that's when I go into my like spiritual teacher mode and say, the universe is basically putting you into a place in the here and now moment where it wants you to pause. Like, yes, you're a workaholic, but you're being forced to not work right now. You're in a pause. Like, it's time for you to, look at your life and see like which direction you're going to go next. It's not a time to do. Aries want to do, right? They're busybody. But the universe, as we look at your solar return chart, is saying, no, not right now. And so what is it saying you should be doing with your time, and so helping and coaching people through, what's transpiring so that they could, navigate. But my biggest thing is teaching people and then teaching them how to figure out the rest themselves. So I tell them, this is what's happening. And when they say, "Oh, Lori, what about, my moon is in my ninth house. What does that mean?" And I'll say, "Let me look up your chart," and I'll tell them what degree their moon is and where it falls in. And then I tell them to Google it, or I tell them to go to the bookstore and buy a book, or go to YouTube and type it in the search engine, because you need to be curious about it yourself, and you need to hear it from different avenues and see it from different perspectives and see what relates best to you. So I'll give you the tools and I'll put them in your hand, but the rest you need to navigate yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it's like learning to read. It can be that transformative.
It really is. And it feels that way too. Like when you literally have aha moments once you allow yourself to delve into it. Yeah. What do you think was your biggest aha with your natal chart?
My natal chart?
Your birth chart.
Well, I suppose, there are different aha moments that, come into focus as, different parts of my life unfold. Well, I think like the Leo Scorpio Sun Moon square, held, with this Libra rising, trying to, keep the peace between all of that.
Totally.
That's kind of the tension I deal with.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that, but too, Leo likes to be in the limelight, and Scorpio doesn't really want to be seen at all. Either they'd rather, well, sometimes they do. There's many. That's the one thing I find super interesting about astrology is that, like, when you meet a Gemini, a lot of Geminis are super similar. They have like super strong traits, and you can almost point them out. But like, there's some signs that like their traits could be like lots of different, like Scorpio, for example. I've met every type of Scorpio there is. They're not all the same. I've met some Scorpios that have lots of Scorpio in their chart, and they're like super nice and fun and social. And I'm like, I never guess. And the only way I ever guess a Scorpio, if their sun, their moon, or their Venus is in Scorpio, is because my first house is in Scorpio and I'm magnetically attracted to them. There is always something about them. And so I'll like, even like stars on TV, when there's something about them, I'll be like, oh my God, like I feel so drawn to them. And then I'll go look up their chart and I'll be like, oh, their moon's in Scorpio, or their Venus is in Scorpio. I get it now, And so I that pull to Scorpios is forcing me to learn things in life, So, but I've seen so many different types of Scorpios. And then the same with Capricorn, no, not Capricorn. What's the other one? Scorpio is the one where I met a lot of different types of people. And no, Aries is, what is the other one? Do you know what I mean though? Like, and I don't mean because they have different planets and different signs. I mean, some signs are versatile. And you know, Leo is very versatile too, though, because then there's the shy Leo, and then there's the Leo that really wants to be in the limelight. And I think Leos are also, you know, maybe sometimes hard to spot. But like a typical Leo, they're leaders at heart, you know, and they're usually like the ones that like get people going and moving and enjoying themselves. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, to go back to what you were saying about Scorpios, I think like the scary Scorpios, the ones who cause trouble for, you know, everybody around them, are usually the scared Scorpios.
Yes.
But the Scorpios, I think, who are, you know, more pleasant to be around are the ones who have, you know, confronted whatever it is that they're afraid of.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like they've already seen the dark side and they're like not tripping on things. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think Scorpios are super sensitive. All Scorpios are super sensitive, but that they don't know that they're naturally magnetic, if that makes any sense. Like they're the beautiful one in the room that doesn't always know they're the beautiful one in the room. Does that make sense?
They're oblivious to their own power.
Yeah, I think sometimes they really are because they're too wrapped up in their emotions, the intensity of how they feel. Yeah, I really do.
They're not scheming and plotting. I don't know. I think some of them might be scheming and plotting.
If they want something, yeah. Yeah. Like, but it's because they have that natural manipulation. They want something, they're going to find a way to get it, right? Yep. That's their intensity of their emotions taking control. But like, they're so wrapped up in that feeling of that need that they need to fill or they need to control that they don't know that other people are magnetically drawn to them. They're too wrapped up in themselves. They're definitely, you know, self-absorbed. I think they're one of the most self-absorbed signs because they get so wrapped up in their feelings.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing. It's just who they are. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean they're bad. Because I know some Scorpios that are super, you know, thoughtful, but they still are. It's still hard for them to see outside of, you know, their own at times, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So we always play a game at the end. Yeah, we always play a game at the end, and I have not fully, you know, come to what we're going to do for our game. But I think what I'm going to do is, let's do it like this. Let's think of a planet, and then let's associate it with a band and why.
Oh, cool. 30 seconds to Mars. I win.
So think of a planet. And then think of a band name and why you associate that planet to that band. Does anybody want to go first?
I just did. 30 seconds to Mars.
Well, that's cheating.
Cheating. Okay, I'll think. Y'all go first. I'll think.
Okay. For me, I'm gonna say Cyndi Lauper on the cusp of Pisces and Aquarius. Can you see it? Cyndi Lauper.
Cyndi Lauper. Pisces.
So Cyndi Lauper is so unique with her like style and out there, but she has such a gentle soul about her. Like she's so like sweet and gentle, but yet she's like, when you look at her, she's like her own person, like totally like outside the norm. I would say she would be like 1 foot in Aquarius, 1 foot in Pisces.
Okay, I see that. Yeah.
You see that? Yeah. All right, your guys' turn.
So are you looking for a planet or a zodiac sign that embodies the band?
That's so funny you even say that because I always associate planets to zodiac signs like their ruler. So like I see Neptune and I see a Uranus. When I see Aquarius and Pisces, I don't see them different. So I guess we could say either way. You could say either the zodiac
Okay.
sign or planet.
Okay, so what musician has the energy? I mean, gosh dang, talk about things that COVID messed up. Like, I don't listen to music as often as I used to because, now there are all these podcasts on where people are, yapping about one thing or another and cut into my music time,
Yeah, totally. I totally get it. But there are really famous musicians out there that like everybody can think of. Like what planet would you associate Michael Jackson with?
Well, Mercury, because I think he's, I think he is a Virgo sun, so that's kind of cheating. But like Mercury, kind of shapeshifts a lot, and he did, physically shapeshift in some ways in his life. He's sort of an ambiguous character, and he's sort of a puer aeternus as well. He, was sort of, a youthful figure, into old age, and there was, some strangeness associated with that, but
he was also very sensitive.
Yeah.
And very elusive and very fantasy oriented, and I would associate him with Neptune or Pisces for sure.
I was just about to ask you, is he Pisces? He sounds like a Pisces. I think he's a Pisces.
Michael Jackson.
He's not. Like he's actually a Virgo.
He's a Virgo, but we now I want to look at his chart because there may be something else in Pisces there.
I was going to bring in Pisces with Kurt Cobain and Neptune.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. Yeah,
Justin Bieber too.
Yeah,
Justin Bieber's a Pisces, and
is he?
Yeah, they're super imaginative and creative. It makes a lot of sense. All right, Matt, give us a musical star and their planet and a planet. A star and a planet.
Cobain and Neptune. I can think of another one though. Freddie Mercury, and that would be. What would Freddie Mercury be?
Think about him as a character.
Yeah.
I don't know. Jimi Hendrix. What would he be associated with?
Ooh, that's a good one. Maybe an Aquarius.
What?
Maybe a Leo or Aquarius. I can see him as he was super. He liked, he was good in the limelight. He was very unique with his style.
He had to be Pisces. Neptune. Maybe. I don't know. I have to look it up.
Maybe. But yeah. So this has been fun. As we start to wrap it up, Eva, is there anything that you want to relay to the audience, either about your astrological books or any messages you want to send out to, everybody about, maybe, what you're trying to relay through your writing or anything of that nature?
Let's see. Well, I'll share some of the basics. I blog at astrologybooks.substack.com. I've started recently a weekend entertainment guide feature every Friday that introduces other astrology blogs that I think are putting out good content. So that's a good guide to the astrology content available on Substack and elsewhere. Impossible Dreams is available currently in both paper book and ebook formats on Amazon.com, and the link should be in the show notes. Wonderful. And I also am in the rotation of daily horoscope writers at tarot.com, and let's see, I wrote May's daily horoscopes, so if you go to tarot.com and create a free account, they'll email you your daily horoscope and daily love horoscope every single day for free.
Cool.
And you write that?
I write select months. So May is one of the months that's written by me, and then other months are written by other writers there. So
Gotcha. Wonderful. I'll make sure that I put your link in the show notes. If you were to predict this summer, on an end note, because summer is upon us, what would you say people should expect, this summer to be like? I know that April and May is still going to be a doozy. April's probably like that month this year where we probably felt the most. But what should we think about with the summer? I think it's going to calm down at all.
Well, Jupiter is going to be in Gemini. So what I'd say about Jupiter and Gemini is that you don't have to go super far to have an interesting trip. Gemini is a sign of, chatter and short trips and getting to know your neighborhood. So, it could be a pretty social summer. But you don't necessarily need to, physically cross the world to have a, interesting trip. So.
I like the sound of that. I live in a new community and I'm really trying to get to know my neighbors. And they're actually having, there's a Gen X group in my community, and they coincidentally actually live around the corner from me. And they're doing a Margaritaville murder mystery. And I'm like, oh, I want to go. That sounds so fun. And I'll get to meet a lot of new, neighbors that, in my genre age group, or what is the title for what is that when we say Gen X or
generation?
Yeah, your generation, is that the only
I think
term?
so, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll meet other people in my generation.
Yeah, but that's like perfect for Jupiter and Gemini. I think it's a good time to meet people and make contacts and build your social network, but like don't be like, oh, I'm networking. Just enjoy yourself a little.
Enjoy yourself. Yeah, have a good time. Yeah. That'll happen naturally with Gemini, because Gemini they want to just they're the salesmen of the zodiac. They're the bullshitters of the zodiac. Like, you gotta be careful what you believe out of a Gemini, because sometimes they say things just to say things and they don't even remember that they said it. All right. Well, it's been wonderful, Eva. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an awesome, experience talking to you about your books and astrology. I could talk about astrology all day.
Oh, yeah.
That, the podcasters don't want to hear about it all day. But so we'll end it on that note. And, I look forward to talking to you again in the near future.
All right. Thanks so much, Lori. I appreciate it.